And it's important to bear in mind that up to 30% of colorectal cancers are attributed to serrated polyps. So the first step in utilizing serrated polyps or as a key performance indicator is to actually recognize them. And just to remind you about the WASP criteria, you're looking for the following features: a mucus cap, cloud-like surface, the fine lacy vessels, the dark spots within the crypts, the indistinct border, and the irregular shape. And also important to recognize the adenoma within an SSL, because often the adenoma gets resected and the SSL stays behind, and that's a high cause or one of the big causes of recurrences. Now, this was discussed a little bit in the ADR session this morning, and I'm sorry to regress, but I just want to make one point coming back to that, which I think might be relevant to certain viewers depending where you're from. So I think Prof. Kaminski mentioned the mixed cases or the mixed case peg of ADR. And he used, for example, endoscopists who scope mostly female patients as an example, or endoscopists who scope patients for various indications and reflected that that might affect your ADR rates. Just wanted to add one more potential variable to that, and that's ethnicity. And I think the relevance of that is certainly pertinent to my setting. It's long been believed that African patients in Africa have a lower adenoma detection rate or lower rate of adenomas. We unfortunately don't have the literature to prove this. We are working on it, and it's certainly probably something that's going to change. So it's a dynamic thing. It's going to be affected by diet. It's going to be affected by environmental changes, which as we become more westernized, perhaps we'll develop more adenomas. So it's something that's going to be variable. And I think the point I'm trying to drive is that ethnic differences do play a role, and that these rates are probably going to be something that's dynamic and shouldn't be the same rate that we're using for the last 30 years. So in summary, clinically significant sessile detection rates vary across the literature, but most studies use a cut benchmark of 7%. Proximal serrated detection rates of 11%. Recognizing these lesions is key. And I don't think we should be correlating ADR to SDR. In my opinion, I think they're separate quality parameters. So I don't think SDR should replace ADR, but rather should be a complementary KPI when auditing ourselves. And certainly training and audits can improve detection rates.
So dysplasia and SSP, they are high-risk lesions, as I've already shown to you in one of the previous slides. I hope this is a clear image, but you have the serrated polyp part here, and you're looking for a transition zone between different neoplastic pit patterns, one being the sessile, the serrated pattern, and then here you can see the adenomatous pit pattern. Here, this is a very nice one, but be aware, don't resect only this part. We need to resect this as well. Very high-risk lesion. Histology is an imperfect gold standard because dysplastic foci are often small, maybe destroyed, maybe undiscovered, if the slices are too big. So we need to use our endoscopic imaging to detect dysplasia within SSP. We need to trust our image. If you get a pathology report back and you have described it as a SSPD and it comes back as a SSP without dysplasia, or it comes back as an adenoma, just go back to your pathologist and ask them to re-review.
So just go back to this really difficult thing we just did. So here's the resection zone of that thing, that sessile serrated polyp on the hepatic flexure. It was very, very difficult, extremely difficult. And so we spent a lot of time looking at the margins, but still the margins are very difficult to define. And if we just come back around here and then try and do another retro to make the point, I think that what we can just conclude here is that you know, while piecemeal collar polypectomy, again, I'll say it, I've said it I don't know how many times today, in expert centers, because they're the ones publishing, right? So Michael's study, for example, gives great rates, right, of recurrence at surveillance. This is just not real life. And because how can you compare those results with results of studies like the CARE study? And you may say, oh, that was a long time ago. But, you know, where how many is it? 30% of sessile serrated polyps,
Yes,
more,
yeah,
were incompletely resected. I mean, you can't. And I just think that this is a really nice example of why that might be. Because when you start something like this, I mean, it's just so difficult. Like, more difficult than most of the ESD I did last week, right? And to get it complete, right? Have to be very meticulous. You have to really focus on the edges. And still, you know, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, what about the 6 o'clock? What about the right border? But it's just so difficult to get the snare there. So I do think there are a subset of things which are just extremely difficult to do. And then you have to think, well, if I'm struggling with it, then so is the majority of people. And we have to have strategies for dealing with that. And so I do think that while most people think, oh, cold snare, simple technique, very safe, the chance of recurrence here, I think, is high. And you want to come back and look at the scar, and then you have to deal with all the things which you need to deal with if you get recurrence. And I think that while the message is out there that this is safe, the message that it's effective in non-expert hands is not established for me. I don't know what the others think about that.
I agree with you, David. One other question. Are you going to tattoo that site? Do you find that...
Well, I think that site is... I mean, it's a very defined
scars?
site. It's on the hepatic flexure, so
Yeah.
I won't. But I'll do the surveillance. So again, I'll not be worried about finding it. But yeah, I mean, I do think that's a valid point. If you're sending it somewhere else and you think it will be hard to find, I really think you should be doing that, no?
Yeah. I mean, that's, as you say, location will assist. It's a big lesion. Undoubtedly, there'll be a scar, but the scars are never as pronounced as they are for adenomatous polyps than where you're doing a traditional, standard EMR, I find.
Yeah. Any other comments on that, what we saw, and in terms of technique?
Well, you mentioned the CARE study 2013. There's been a follow-up this year from GIEQs. I don't know if...
Better.
Yeah. I think it's again a non-expert study, very important study, which basically sort of confirms what they saw in 2013. Would everyone agree with that? Am I interpreting that right? Steve, you have your doubts?
No, I thought that was, or was it this Daniel von Retten's study with Alan Bark? And I think
that's a different one. Yeah, there's a different
that
one.
One was actually pretty good.
Yeah, that one was, but that was not non-expert, I think.
Yeah.
So we have to, again, bear that in mind.
Non-expert studies, guys, are just so rare, aren't they?
They are very rare.
They're just,
that's why we
don't
keep
do
on
them.
quoting CARE, I think, no?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Yuichi, are there Japanese endoscopists doing non-expert studies into things?
No, I don't think so. We have completely different occasion with regard to the handling of this kind of lesion. It might be very unbelievable for you guys in the West, but some Japanese people prefer doing ESD for this kind of lesion. But this is just exception.
What's your opinion?
Not reasonable, I would say.
Not reasonable, right? What's the rationale for that, Yuichi?
I don't know. You know, the people in Japan prefers making a nice specimen in a one en bloc fashion. That's that's just matter of beauty.
I can make
Beauty
them beautiful, but just there are some ones which are just not beautiful, and unfortunately for TV, that was not one of them. But I do think, I was saying to Lynn just now, oh yeah, you could have selected an easier thing for me to cut off than that when I came in the room.
So which is true in serrated polyposis syndrome. It is the most common polyposis syndrome, and half the people have it right.